So if you own a business, obviously there are business expenses that you can claim, and typically those are any expenses you're paying for that you otherwise wouldn't if you didn't have the business. Things that are actually needed for operating the business and generating an income for the business. But what I want to address here is certain expenses that you can claim as business expenses that might actually be a little bit more on the personal side as opposed to the business side. So when you are operating a business, there are going to be things that you use for your business that you also use for personal reasons. And you probably had these things or had these expenses before you even started a business, but oftentimes you can actually claim them, or at least a portion of them, on your business taxes, whether that's for an unincorporated business, on your personal taxes, on the business side of that, or if you are incorporated, on the corporate tax return. And so what are some of the examples of the expenses I'm talking about? Well, one of the main ones would be your phone expense. So you probably already have a cell phone, you're probably paying a monthly fee plan for it. And if you're using that phone for personal and then you're now using it for business as well, then you can probably claim at least a portion of that phone bill as a business expense, as long as you're legitimately using it for business. And you'll probably want to break it down by usage. So maybe it's 50-50, maybe it's 10% business, 90% personal, or vice versa. But that's one thing to keep in mind for an expense that you'll use personally, but you can also claim at least a portion for business as well. Another example would be vehicle expenses. And again, this can vary. I can't speak for the whole world here. I'm mostly speaking from a Canadian perspective. If you own a personal vehicle and then you use that vehicle for business reasons, like if you're going to business meetings, if you're going to networking events, if you're going to meet with clients, if you're going to buy, supplies and equipment for your business, you're now using that personal vehicle for business purposes. And if that's the case, then you should be able to claim, at least a portion of gas and oil changes and maintenance and car washes and even depreciation of the asset. And then on top of that, if you're paying for parking, especially if it's parking for a specific business meeting or event, then typically you can claim that whole amount for parking. Whereas with the general vehicle expenses, if you're still using that vehicle, partly or largely for personal use, then you won't be able to claim the full vehicle expenses as business expenses. And one thing to keep in mind about this, especially in Canada, is that if you own a business and all you do is drive to your office and then drive home, typically you cannot claim that portion as business expenses because, the rule is everyone does that. Even if you don't own your own business, you're still driving to work every day. So that is something to be mindful of and do some research on and speak with an accountant before you start claiming those on your income taxes, because you want to make sure that you get it right. The next thing would be devices. Let's say you're buying a new laptop only for the purpose of business. It's just at your office. You don't really use it for personal. That's now a business expense, or even better yet, a business asset. So you can treat that a little bit differently than a regular expense. However, if you're buying a new laptop that's going to be for work reasons, for business reasons, and also for personal reasons, then that's probably something that you can claim at least a portion of as a business expense. Same thing with a phone or a camera. If you're doing what I do and you're making YouTube videos and you're really only using a camera for business, then you could probably claim that whole camera as a business asset or expense. Whereas if you're filming on a phone that you use for personal reasons and business reasons, then you should at least be able to claim a portion of that. And then another thing you may be eligible to claim that's typically a personal expense, but may at least in part become a business expense if you're operating a business, is if you have a home-based business where your home is your principal area of operating the business, then in some cases at least you can claim things like a portion of the utilities, a portion of the rent or the mortgage, things like that. And that of course depends. There's certain criteria that you need to meet. And I will leave a link in the video description to the Canada Revenue Agency website that breaks that down. But it is something to be aware of. And all the ones I mentioned, that's not an exhaustive list, but all the ones I mentioned are important. You'll want to do some research, speak with an expert, speak with an accountant, find out what you can claim, because in my opinion, it's very important to claim as much as you possibly can that is legitimately a business expense, because for every business expense that you claim, it reduces your taxable income. So play fair, play by the rules, but don't miss anything. All those ones I mentioned, claim those on top of your actual regular business expenses, like if you're paying rent for an office space or you're buying notebooks or things like that that are for business and only for business. And if you got any value from the video, please click like and feel free to check out my YouTube channel here, where I currently have over 200 videos that cover business management and business startup topics.